Welcome, dear students. We were at Unit 4 and in the 8th lecture of Unit 4 in Requirement Analysis and Specification. Till now, we have seen the requirement engineering tasks. In that, we were at the elaboration phase. In requirement modeling, we were in elements of model. We had already covered scenario-based and behavior models and class models. Now we shall move on to flow models. Flow models are nothing but a representation of a data flow diagram. Now what is a data flow diagram? Data flow diagram is not a part of the UML diagrams that you have studied. It is not a part of your unified modeling language, like your class, use case, use stories, stage, sequence, activity, swim lane. But DFD is complementing all these UML diagrams with the knowledge of what is going in your system, what is the process happening in your system, and what kind of output your system is giving you. So all these things will be represented through a data flow diagram called as a flow model or flow element of requirement engineering. Okay, now use of data flow diagram. So the use is we come to know what is going in the system, we come to know what functions are applied to the system, and we come to know what is the output of your system. So this is how your data is going to flow throughout the whole software or the whole system. Now, what you are supposed to represent in a data flow diagram? So you are supposed to represent the external entity. External entity is a person who is going to use the software. It can be a software which is going to use another software, or it can be a hardware that is going to make use of your software. So external entity is something which can be a person, it can be a software, it can be a hardware. So anything that is going to use your system is supposed to be an external entity. Next, you are supposed to represent a process. Now, what is a process? So process is nothing but one kind of a functionality of your system. So if you are booking or issuing a book in library, then you can say that issue book is a process which is happening. So you can say, in short, all the functionalities of your software are represented in form of process. Next is data flow. Data flow is nothing but arrows, and these arrows can represent what is the input to your system, what is the output to your system. So these things are depicted through data flows. Next is data stores. So data stores are nothing but it is a storage where your data can be stored. Generally, these are databases. So you are representing a total of 4 things in your data flow diagram. The thing that is using your software, the functionalities that are implemented in your software, what kind of data is flowing in and flowing out, and where your data is stored. So these 4 things are to be represented in the diagram. Now, there are no fixed rules or regulations for making a data flow diagram, but your data flow diagram should be very understandable. It should depict how your system is working, what is flowing inside, what is flowing outside the system. So all these data are represented by certain norms which are regularly followed, but not very hard and fast. Okay, so it is better if you use them. You can say that these are some sorts of guidelines of making DFD. Okay, so if you are representing any external entity, that is a person, hardware or software, it should be represented by a rectangle, and that particular rectangle must be named. There should be no flow between two external entities possible. So if I have user 1 and if I have another user 2, then user 1 and user 2 will directly not be able to communicate with each other. Next is a process. So whatever process you have, it must be labeled properly and it must not be repeated in the whole diagram again. Next is a data flow. So data flows are, you always know there is some input and there is some output. You cannot have input and output through a same arrow. That is what I mean by saying that data flows are not bidirectional. It is only unidirectional. It will flow in only one direction. Next is the data flows should always be labeled and the labels should be precise and informative. Okay. You cannot leave any label as it is unless and until it is coming from a data store. You don't need to label it. And what are how you are representing data stores? You are not showing data stores or where your data is being stored in the context level diagram. That is the first diagram. We will see it in the next slide. And no direct data flows between two data sources. Means you cannot directly give a data from a database to another database. There has to be some process in between. Only then data can flow from one database to another database. It can never be direct flow. Okay, so this is my data flow diagram for the cardio health monitor system. If you want to know more about this system, you can refer to the fourth lecture of unit number 4. There you will be able to know how the cardio health monitor system works, what are the functionality of this software. We shall now see the data flow diagram at level 0. Now data flow diagram is something which is represented in levels 0, 1 and 2. And in all these levels, you are going into more details. You are becoming more specific of the data flow that you want to show. So level 0 is a level at which you are showing very abstract information where you are not revealing complete details of your system. So this is how it works. In the level 0, you are supposed to represent all the users of your system or external entities of your system. So as I said, it can be a person, it can be a hardware, or it can be another software. So I have represented the users of my system and hardware that I'm using in my system. So this is called a bubble, and as it is level number 0, this particular bubble is named 0. Now this 0th bubble will have the name of your system written here. It can be CHM or it can be cardio health monitor, whatever you wish. Now the users of this system is a practitioner, that is a doctor. Another user is administrator, and there is a hardware which I have embedded or used along with my software, that is a cardio clip. Now you are supposed to show what data is given as an input here and what kind of data is coming out of the system. So let us take an example of a practitioner first. So the practitioner is giving certain input to the system. So practitioner is giving input in form of test details, in form of report, in form of his own details, practitioner, as well as his own client's detail. So he can register the client, he can register himself, he can edit his profile, he can view the reports of the client, he can conduct tests. So test, report, practitioner and client details are given as input by the practitioner to the system. So the system is going to give a reply to all these input actions that he has given. So all these things 1, 2, 3 and 4, they will be represented here. Client, test, report and practitioner details. Input action, whatever you have given, we are getting a response of that action. So this data is nothing but your input details that you have given here, and you are adding the word response here to show that this is coming out of the system. Okay. Next is administrator. Now administrator can add a practitioner. So he is registering a practitioner, so practitioner details, and he can also log in himself. So he is adding his own details. So practitioner plus admin details are given as input here. This is the input to the system. So this is given as input, and practitioner plus admin details, input action, response is given back to the administrator. Next is the cardio clip. Now cardio clip is something which is worn by the client, and it is taking measurements and giving into the software. So remember, cardio clip is used only for giving the input details, but there is no response coming out back to the cardio clip. So it is only a one-way function, that test details are given as input to the system. There will be no response from the system to the cardio clip. Okay, so this is level number 0, where I am giving only abstract details. Now, what do you mean by client details? What do you mean by test details? What do you mean by report details? What do you mean by practitioner details? Similarly, what do you mean by test details? What do you mean by practitioner details? What do you mean by admin details? So all these data is given with the help of a data dictionary for a data flow diagram. That is data dictionary for a DFD. Now the DFD data dictionary is represented like this. So wherever I am having client details input action, okay, so you can say this: client details input action, or practitioner details input action, or report details input action, or test details input action. Okay, so this is how you can split it. This plus stands for or. Okay, so you can use detail input action with each and every things that I have written in the plus. Okay, so if I write client details input, then it says client ID, client name, date of birth, gender, weight, weight unit, height, height unit, address, contact number, email, country ID is a smoker. So all these things are client's details that you are giving into a system. And test details can be test ID, client ID, CVA, BMI, average heart rate, oxygen, rest date. Report details can be stiffness index ID, risk factor, upper limit, lower limit with a client ID. Okay, now these three things were given as input action. We were getting a response to all this. So response has to be in form of generally a message or some kind of data. So in response you will write client details input action response, means for this input that you are giving, what kind of response you will get. So you can get a client registration message. It can be a positive message or a negative registration message. Then you can get some kind of client data, you can get some kind of test data, you can get some kind of report data for a particular client. Next is test details input action. So you can get a message of test is successfully taken, test has not been able to take successfully. Then any message reflecting the test details of a client, that you can get here. Report details is a report generation message, a report view message, a report print message. Okay, next is practitioner details input action. So that includes practitioner ID, username, email, password, his account is active, how many number of clients are registered under the doctor, what is the first name of the doctor, what is the last name. Admin details input action will have admin ID, his username and password. And response will be for practitioner, The response can be signing up, login, log out, edit profile, client register message, view report, message report generation, taking a test message. And for admin, the response can be in form of sign up message, login message, log out message, practitioner registration, manage account, or message. Okay, so these things can be in your data dictionary of a cardio health monitor system. So we have seen in details what is level 0. Now we will move on to level number 1. In level number 1, you are supposed to decompose or bring a little more detail than you had specified in level 0. So that you can specify like this. Okay. So this is my level 1 diagram. I am focusing on only 4 functionalities. In details, I had told you that I have a total of 8 functionalities. So I'm showing only 4 functionalities here, and generally it is recommended you show 5 to 9 different processes in your level 1. But I will be showing you only 4. Now what are these 4 bubbles? These 4 bubbles here are the processes that are taking place in my software. You can say these are the functionalities of my software. So as you know that there is a in the use case we saw an ellipse called client management. In the use case we saw an ellipse called test management. In the use case we saw an ellipse of report management, and in the use case we saw an ellipse of practitioner profile management. So I am focusing on only these 4. So these are my processes. Now this is my level number 1. So I have started from this diagram, that is context diagram, which was actually a 0 here, as it is a 0th level. Now we are moving to 1 level down. So we are naming these bubbles as 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 and 0.4. You can name them in any order, but it has to be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 and 0.4. So I am showing a total of 4 different features at level 1, which is down the context level. Now, what details are going into the client management? So client details input action is going in, and client details input action is responses coming out. And whatever client you are registering, you are either adding a client, you are deleting a client, you are viewing a client, you are updating a client, all the data will be reflected in a database or a data store called client master. So this is your process, this is your data flow, and this is your data storage. There is no external entity mentioned here. External entity is shown in level 0 here, and here you don't have external entities. You have data store, data flow and process. Okay, next functionality is a test functionality where client input details are given, output details are given, data of the client is taken from here and it is stored in test master. Okay, so these things are in a test master. Next is report. Now for a report, you are taking data for client from here, you are taking data of test from here, and based on that you are generating a output in form of client plus test detail input action response. Okay, next is your practitioner profile management. Means he can edit his password, he can change his profile. Okay, so for that you are taking already stored data of the practitioner and you are updating the data of the practitioner inside the database, and what is going in is any changes in his ID, any changes in his name, in his password, and this is the response. Now as you can see, anything that is coming into the database or anything which is flowing out of the database is not labeled. You cannot label them. You don't have to label them. You have to label only things which are coming inside the process, which are outside the database. Okay, so I think level 1 is clear to you. We shall now move on to level 2 diagram. Now level 2 diagram is a further decomposition of your level 1 diagram. Let us see how. This is my level 1 diagram. I will be focusing on client management, which I will be showing in detail. Okay, and then I will be showing report management in detail. But you need to show all these in detail. You also need to show test. You also need to show practitioner profile. But I will be covering these two in detail, client and report. Let us see client management. Now, client management at level 1 was named 0.1. So when I'm further decomposing it, I have to decompose it as 0.1.1, 0.1.2, 0.1.3 and 0.1.4. So what can we do in case of client management? You can either add a client, you can delete a client, you can view a client, or you can update a client. So these are the things that you can do in client management. Okay, so in adding a client, we are giving client details, we are getting a response. Plus, we are taking something from database, we are adding something from database. In delete client, you are deleting something, you are getting a response of delete. You are taking data, you are storing data. In update client, you are taking data, you are storing data, and you are giving some update action, input action, and you are getting output. Similarly, when you are viewing, you are able to get something, you are giving your data inside, you are getting a response, and you are taking something from the database. You can neglect this arrow which is showing a view. As it is view, you don't need to take something from the database. This part you need to take from the database, but you don't need to store for viewing. Okay, similarly for adding a client, you don't need to take something from a database, but what you are taking from a database here is rights to edit in the database. Okay, here you are taking rights to edit or view from the database. So that is what you are taking here, nothing apart from that. That is why I have shown these two arrows, which are actually not compulsory if you don't want to show. Okay, so in add, you can remove this taking from database, because it is nothing but rights of using the database that you are taking. And here also, viewing also, you are taking rights of updating the database. That is why I have mentioned them. They are totally optional. So this is what I have shown in client management. Next, we will move on to report management. That is 0.3. So my report management has to be 0.3.1, 3.2 and 3.3. So what can you do with a report? You can print, you can email, or you can display a report. So you are giving a print command and you are getting a print response. Here you are giving email details, and this is a response to the email. Okay, so and this is a display report, so you are giving the client details and you are getting your report here. So for all this, you are supposed to use the test master database in order to view the reports. So this is how we are writing or preparing a DFD diagram. We have seen the various levels of decomposition at level 1 and level 2, with a total of detailed representation of two functionalities, that is client management and report management. Okay, so let us see some guidelines. At level 0, your system should be depicted as a single bubble, which we have already done. This is a single bubble. Okay, next is primary input and output should be carefully noted. So here we have shown the primary input output from practitioner, administrator and cardiac. Next is refinement should begin by isolating candidate process, data objects and data stores to be represented at next level. So in short, your level 0 should be abstract and decomposition or detailing should be starting from the next level. All arrows and bubbles should be labeled with meaningful names as we have done, and information flow continuity must be maintained from level to level. Okay, so information flow continuity means here if I have given 0.3 as report, then if I am detailing report, I compulsory have to write 0.3.1, 0.3.2, etc. So that is continuity. And one bubble at a time should be refined. So you should be able to refine or detail one bubble at a time. You cannot do all of them simultaneously, one after another. You should move on to different bubbles. And the last topic of this chapter, that is rules for data flow diagram. It says that there should be no logic shown in the flow chart because it is there should be no logic in the DFD like loops or if else, because it is not a flow chart. So you cannot write something like a decision support or a continuous loop moving on. It is just input and output. In order to keep your diagram uncluttered, you can repeat the data stores and external entities. So if you think your diagram is going very complex, you can repeat the external entities and you can repeat the data stores in your diagram. No process can have only output data. Okay, if you are just keeping on giving out outputs, it is not possible. Okay, because without input, you cannot get an output. Similarly, you just can't have only input data without any output. Okay, this applies to the decomposition levels 1 and 2. Okay, not for 0. Data cannot be moved directly from one store to another without a process. This we have already discussed. And data cannot move directly from external entity to a data store without a process. Similarly, as you cannot move data from one store to another store without process, you cannot move data directly from an external entity to a data store without a process. This was all for data flow diagrams. See you in the next chapter. Thank you.